Hi, thanks for joining us on Conversations on Health, Happiness, and Hope. We have a special type of episode for you today. Janae, do you want to say what we're doing?
So, yes, thank you. We are talking about neurodivergence today, which I love that term so much better than what we used to call it when I was a child growing up. And I feel like a more loving term to use when we are discussing children and adults with learning differences. So, and personality types too is also a little bit of what I see it as, just from experience. So, so we're going to be talking a little bit about neurodivergence and how that affects people in mostly positive ways, even when there are some tough things to have to deal with.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that you're going to touch on both aspects, what people are seeing in strengths wise and also some of the struggles that they may come across. So we're going to do an interview style since Janae has more experience and knowledge with neurodivergence, so you can learn along with me. All right, Janae, can you tell us what neurodivergence is and why it's important to you?
So neurodivergence is I'm sorry, I lost my notes.
Oh, you're totally okay.
And I was wondering if this was going to happen on this, but it did. All right. Well, I will just talk as I'm pulling them up. Neurodivergence is, I guess.
Uh-oh, you froze for me. If
Okay.
anyone's on, is Janae frozen for you too?
And am I
Oh,
back?
there you are. You're
Okay,
back.
there I am. All
Yes.
right. It won't let me look at my notes. That's what's happening.
Oh no.
So I will just have to remember what I wrote down.
Here, let me
um,
see if I'm able to help you with that in some way.
okay. All
Check
right.
your messages.
Well, if it's possible, you can copy and paste it into maybe an email and send it to me. Yes.
Yeah, no
So
problem.
that would be perfect. So neurodivergence, I think, covers a lot of what we would typically call atypical behavior, and most of my experience has been from a child's point of view. So children with ADHD, autism, Asperger's, any other type of developmental delay or challenge that a child would have or a person would have, because these go into adulthood as well. And
Mhm.
sometimes a lot of us find that as we're watching these things in the people that we work with, and then we read more about it, it's like, oh, well, that makes you start feeling these connections like, oh, I do that. I do that. I feel that way. And it's like,
Mhm.
oh, maybe I am adult ADHD or an adult with autism. And you realize that it's not something to stigmatize. It doesn't need to be stigmatized. um,
Mhm.
I see them as personality traits. And once you're able to kind of accept it that way, then I am personally able to work with it in a very like loving and caring way. Whereas,
Mhm.
if I'm being judgmental about it, and maybe denying that there is something else going on besides just a person being stubborn or just being selfish, then that's where like a lot of conflict comes from between people, from my point of view.
Well, I appreciate that. Um, I always feel like we have some good things to point out. So I'm just putting some comments in there from
Mhm.
for certain quotes, and I really like that it does not need to be stigmatized, and you think of them as personality traits.
Mhm.
So just put that in the comment.
Oh, nice. Yes. And both of my children are neurodivergent. diagnosed. So my daughter is ADHD. My son is also ADHD, and he has ODD, and I can never remember the exact wording, but it's like the oppositional um, distress disorder, something like that. It's ODD, and really what it is, it's like when you tell him to do something, he does not want to do it, and that's very typical of just children in general. But where it becomes an issue is that it affects his everyday life. Like most kids will be like, "Oh, I don't want to do that," and they just go do it. But with him, it just really hindered him from just like even following simple instructions, or it just really got in the way of the enjoyability of his life. So with him, I had to learn different ways of saying things. And at first, it was really frustrating because I come from this old school background. I'm your mom. You have to do what I say. And like, why is my child not listening to me? But I learned that, even something like, oh, it's time to go brush your teeth, that's not enough. It's not enough of a kind way to say it to him, even though it is a kind way of saying it. For most children, saying it's time to brush your teeth is fine. And they'll be like, oh, okay, or they might get upset because, what kid likes to brush their teeth? But they end up going and doing it. But for him, I have to phrase it differently. I need to do it. I need to say, what I found works for him is like, oh, by 6 p.m., we want to make sure that our teeth are brushed and that we're ready for bed and we've gone to, the bathroom and all of that. And so it's just the way in presenting it to him with that, which was really interesting because I didn't even really find that when I was looking for information on it. It was just like, oh, your child has this. That's you just kind of have to deal with it. And I'm sure there's a lot more information now on it. And of course, he's older now, so it's not as difficult because he will verbalize and he will say, when you tell me this, it makes me not want to do it. And I'm like, okay, well then, how do we need to get this done? Because I'm seeing it's not getting done and I need it to get done. And then he'll come back and tell me, well, how about if we do it this way? And so we're able to like kind of work with each other in that way. So it's good. My daughter has other issues, and one of them is trying to stay organized and clean and, that kind of thing. And I mean, I have those issues too. But with her, it's very, very pronounced. And the problem, so it's not a problem until it starts to interrupt your day-to-day life. And so for her, it can be to the point where it's like she doesn't want to invite friends over because her room is so messy, or she wants to clean her room, but she doesn't even know where to start. So after there's a lot more information on ADHD and that kind of thing out there. So there were a lot of helpful things about how to help organize and all of that. But what I found extremely helpful, which I know doesn't come in until a question later, but I did find this one source that explained it so nicely as they were doing a video of cleaning a home and how they clean for a person with ADHD or with OCD. And I was like, oh, and then like the bells went off. I'm like, oh, okay, now I understand. So, and doing that has helped a lot, for her, because then it shows that I'm respecting her and not telling her that she's wrong or bad for the way that she sees the world. But then also being able to have her respect my boundaries when it comes to, keeping things organized in the home.
Yeah. Well, those were both great and helpful examples that you shared regarding your children. So I like how you were talking about rephrasing in a kind or loving way, because your son is actually able to tell you, like, when you say this, it makes me feel. And is that something that you've kind of needed to work on with them, was being able to express those feelings when they're being asked? Or is that something that started to just become easier for them as maybe they got older?
So I think both. So at first it was hard, because as we have kind of a traumatic history, especially them growing up. So it was very hard for them to express themselves in a way that they felt heard, and in a way and without feeling, or shall I say, they weren't able to express themselves and then feel safe once they did. So my son didn't talk until he talked, but he never understood what he said until he was like 3 or 3.5.
Okay.
So he still had like a very babyish way of talking. So he had a very hard time expressing himself. And he, to this day, still has a bit of a speech impediment. And so, so some of it was that active teaching. Okay, you can use your words. And also for me, I had to learn how to use my words, because, even as an adult, you think, oh, you're an adult, you know how to express yourself, but not really. We're not necessarily taught how to express ourselves in an appropriate way, and in a way that other people can receive what we're saying. So, so I had to learn how to adjust my speaking patterns, and a lot of that happened when I was working at the Reggio inspired preschool, because their whole program was based on interpersonal communication and
Wow.
socialization. And so the way you spoke to the children, like, there weren't like you couldn't say no, but they really, really wanted you not to say the word no. Like, find another way to say no, because we don't want children to feel like we're telling them, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this, because they hear no so often. I mean, a lot of times it's one of the very first words a child says. And it's not because they're being defiant, is it because that's the word that they hear all the time? No, don't touch this. No, get down off of the stool. No, don't put that in your mouth. And while none of that is bad, I mean, you have to protect your child. What they really emphasized was really, what do you mean when you say no?
Yeah.
Say that instead. So instead of saying no, you can't have a cookie right now, say, we can have cookies after dinner, or we had cookies earlier today, so we will have more cookies tomorrow. And you're making a statement, and there's nothing for them to argue with, and there's no reason for you to like feel like I told you no and you went and grabbed one anyway. So I learned a lot in that environment, and that really helped. And my son went to school there too. So he also learned some of those things, that as we were coming out of that just trauma reaction response kind of, well, not response, just reactive living and speaking, we were able to then use those tools to work and speak with each other.
Wow, that sounds like something that so many of us could benefit from, without the trauma, is just being able to express ourselves and really say what we're trying to say. I have seen examples of that with like redirection, not necessarily the statement you used, but I like that how you said it's a statement. They can't really argue. Is this somewhere where you could also be like, well, instead of having a cookie, what if you have a glass of milk or something like that?
Yes.
Okay.
Anything like that. And that way it reduces the negativity that comes across in conversation, and interaction. And then we're really getting down into the actual meaning and the reasons behind things. Because I think it can be hard to always explain yourself.
Yeah.
But if you're using these kinds of statements, then the explanation is coming out in your day-to-day conversation. Yeah. And it's still hard. I mean, sometimes, they'll be like, oh, can we have this? And I'll be like, no. And then they'll be like, why? I'm like, oh, I didn't go through the whole explanation. I just said the flat no, which sometimes that's okay. I mean, unless you're using abusive speech, there's no right or wrong. As long as you can come back to having that open communication.
Yeah. Appreciate that. Open communication, no right or wrong. We've talked a lot about children so far, but how does this play out relating to the workplace or socializing as an adult?
So, what I see let's take the workplace first. So in the workplace, you meet all kinds of personalities. And a lot of times people will say things like, oh, well, we just don't click. We don't get along. And sometimes it's not even that the other person doesn't like you. It's just that they have social anxiety. And so to come out and say something to you, like even hi or nod or smile as you walk by, for us, or for me, that might just be like, hi, not a big deal. But for them, it's like climbing through this sludge and breaking down walls just to verbalize a hello or a nod. And so that can come across maybe as rude. And so a lot of times people who are really, really shy or who have neurodivergence, because all of that social interaction and that energy is just so awkward, they can come off as rude. So in the workplace, I found it's really helpful to just not take things personally, which can be really hard. And just to recognize that everybody does things differently. I like to say hi to everybody as I walk through the door, but not everybody does. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. And then when we talk about, working types, there are, all like A type personality, B type personality, or the workaholic personality, the perfectionist. We have all these different types, but recognizing that someone giving you direction or really pushing for this project to get done now when we still have 4 months or whatever the time frame is, that may be just their way of dealing with that stress. They want to see it done and out of their inbox or off of their calendar so that they can move on to the next thing, because maybe in their mind it's just really hard to have too many things lined up on their calendar, and it frustrates them. So I see a lot of that when it comes to managers and things like that, when they're trying to drive a deliverable, and I'm here like, we've got all this time. We really don't need to do this right now. But recognizing that might just be part of how they process things can really help, even if you still can't deliver at the rate that they want you to, but having that understanding can help you be like, okay, this is not a me thing. This is a them thing. I will explain it this way, and just really assure them that this will get done. Don't worry about it. You can count on me. You can go ahead and work on something else. I've got this. So it really just helps, those connections in the workplace, because we spend a lot of time in the workplace. We don't want to be at odds with everyone, even with just one person in the workplace. I mean, it can make your life miserable. Yeah, I think that having a healthy work environment is very important, and going into it knowing that there are people with neurodivergence, and they don't have to disclose that. They may not even realize it themselves. So that just going in with that kind of awareness can help you as a person just really learn to accept other people's personalities and traits, and deal with them in a kind way, while still respecting yourself.
That was great. Appreciate that. I definitely used to be one of those people that was extremely anxious whenever I got an invitation to anything or an urgent email, and I thought, oh goodness, I'm in trouble. What I do? Because like
I'm still
my mind used to go there all the time, and thankfully I've started receiving them like, okay, I know this is where your mind goes, so nothing's wrong, this is okay, or this is a good thing. So I appreciate that you brought that up, and reminders are helpful too. So even if you know that it's due by this day, maybe giving yourself those reminders like, hey, maybe I should be here, or maybe I should do that then. But definitely appreciate you talking about neurodivergence in the workplace as well. Um, Now, you already said that obviously you don't have to disclose this if anybody doesn't want to, it's not required. But what conditions and traits are typically included when we're talking about neurodivergence? I know you already talked about someone being shy or maybe not wanting to communicate or needing something more like strictly laid out.
So it can entail things such as light sensitivity. If things are too bright, if things are too noisy, sound sensitivity, touch sensitivity. That is a big one. Some people just don't like to be touched. And so unless they're very comfortable with the person, and then there are other people who literally talk with their hands, where they talk to you and they put their hand on you, and that's just their way of communication. They're very I cannot tactile. So all of those things can also be a part of, neurodivergence, not just necessarily how they have to have things done or having done things in a certain way. It could really just have to do with just even the fact of if the lights are too bright in an area, then that kind of dysregulates them. And so once you're dysregulated, it can be really hard to do anything except think about how you are just completely uncomfortable and want to get out of the situation as quickly as possible. Yeah.
Appreciate that. So light sensitivity, touching, or like physical sensation is something that we should be aware of as well. So my mom is watching. More okay. She says some people have a different process for doing things. Others may feel they're going nowhere fast. However, they still may complete the task at or before the deadline. That's a great point. Thank you so much. And I think we've all probably had that moment of, oh man, I'm just not getting much done today because this really took me a long time, or this was just, confusing. And then the next day you're like, oh wow, I've actually got all of this done. What a nice surprise. So we've talked about some of the things that might be difficult when encountering neurodivergence. What are some strengths that come with this territory?
So I was thinking about that, and I felt like it was really hard to define at first, but then I realized a lot of times these highly sensitive people are just that, highly sensitive. So they can be very loving, very kind, very in tune to understanding a person's quirks. And so they can be very accommodating, which is lovely because we don't have a lot of that in our society sometimes. Being able to accommodate somebody else's wishes or needs is, I always put the caveat within your boundaries. You don't ever want someone stepping into your space where you're uncomfortable. So, but a person who's neurodivergent can be very accommodating and very understanding. And a lot of times we see people with neurodivergence. I mean, not a lot of times. In every field, we have people who are neurodivergent, but especially therapists, counselors, coaches, teachers, people who really can see that mirror in another person and learn how to teach or incorporate that and to help guide and build another person. So a lot of times neurodivergent people are givers, they're helpers. They're very, very smart, very intuitive, because a lot of times they have to be. They have to be intuitive in order to navigate in this world with their particular sensitivity. It is really difficult. So it takes a lot of emotional strength and tenacity to do that.
That's wonderful. Just a wonderful way of saying that they're going to be very loving and accommodating and understanding and have tenacity and strength. When you were talking about how highly sensitive and how that can be a strength, it made me think of a book. Now, I have not read this book, I've only heard of it and know someone who has recommended, so I can't think of the title or the name, but I can put it in there later, where it's called The Highly Sensitive Person, so HSP. Yep. And apparently that's something that is coming more and more apparent, and just understanding exactly what you were talking about. There's nothing wrong here. We just need to be able to look at it in a kind way. Mm-hmm. And speaking of books, what books or media do you recommend for someone who wants to learn more about neurodivergence? Okay. Maybe people who are watching today.
Yes. So I wrote down some, and so I like to listen to a lot of podcasts. So 2 of them, I listen to anything by Mel Robbins. Nice. Now, she doesn't necessarily talk only about ADHD or neurodivergence, but she talks about a wide spectrum of social interaction, a wide spectrum of just basically how to move one step ahead, if you're trying to succeed in something. So I found it very, very helpful because it can be really inspiring. And then she also does a lot of interviews with professionals. So I like to listen to hers. There is another one called The Crappy Childhood Fairy. And she focuses on CPTSD. So it's a lot of times people who have been through a traumatic situation that have PTSD. CPTSD is complex PTSD, and that is usually that stems from traumatic experiences in childhood, which then causes dysregulation, which then you end up being put into one of these neurodivergent categories, whether it's ADHD or autism or, highly sensitive or, whatever it is. So hers is very good because she also gives very practical advice on how to re-regulate. She's written a book. She's has a membership where you can go and be in a group, like a Zoom group, and kind of talk about things with other people who have had similar circumstances or situations. So I really like her a lot. I love, this is not neurodivergence, but Frank James. He always does these skits on the 16 personalities types. And but if you are neurodivergent, you realize like, oh, I'm introverted, but I'm introverted with this. And he really just does a lot, kind of poking fun at it. But then he also has some videos where he's very serious and just really talks about the personality types. And I like that because that helps me see it more as a personality type. then like there's something wrong with this person, which there isn't. But
Right.
sometimes we can have that stigma.
Appreciate that. For Frank James, the skits, is that also a podcast, or are those like
that
reels?
is he has a YouTube channel.
YouTube channel. Okay.
Yeah. And then the other one is just another YouTube channel. It's the Midwest Magic Cleaning. And that is the one where he kind of talks about, he goes in and helps people clean homes for free. And he's done hoarder houses, he's done people with OCD, he's done ADHD, autism. And so it's more than just watching someone clean a house. He really explains how they think, because he is also autistic. And so like, he's like, this may still seem clutter to you. He's like, but to this type of person, whatever it is, this is going to feel like there's nothing on the counter, and that can be very dysregulating to them. So this is how we need to do things in order for them to come in and feel like, oh wow, my place is organized and clean, but it still has a semblance of their organized chaos that they need. So that was really good because it helped me also. Like, I was like, oh, I do that. I was like, okay, so there's nothing, I'm always like beating myself up. Why do you do that? But okay, this might be why. And this is because that's just how I need to see it in order for me to remember that it's there, because, out of sight, out of mind. And so that was a really, I loved that one. And that one was also one that really helped me understand my daughter and her style and her need, because that was her way of controlling her environment. So we've really been able to work together with that one. So I felt like that was a great one. There is a book called Driven to Distraction, which is a really great book. I was working, I was still a teacher at the time, and my boss came up to me. She was like, you know what? I have a really great book that I think you would like. And so I was reading that one, and she was like, it's really helped me. And so I read, it's great. I mean, it's great. It's literally about, all the things that distract you and how to kind of bring your focus back in and organize your thoughts and making lists and all of that kind of stuff. So those are the ones that I had thought of that I liked off the top of my head. And I'm sure I'll remember other things.
Well, thanks so much for all those great suggestions. I definitely want to check out Midwest Magic Cleaning. In the house that I grew up with, my mom called us all surface abusers. And it drives my husband crazy too. So I think I should look into that. I also want to point out I had a friend message me her favorite, and now I believe this is a book. It's called Your Brain's Not Broken.
Oh,
And
yes, I've heard of that
for
one.
ADHD specifically. So
Nice.
definitely appreciate that. And if she wants to be called out later, I can add her name. But I am going to add all of these into the comments now. And then if there's anything that we need to clarify later, like the author's names or the exact title, we can add that. But that's fantastic. I myself have been wanting to learn more about this, as I find that I have some similar traits and just processes that have come up within the last year or so that have made things harder. And I'll watch these like Instagram and Facebook reels on, oh, my girlfriend with ADHD or my girlfriend with ADD. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's what I do.
It's like affirming. It's like, oh, okay.
Exactly. So I'm going to look into these. Thank you so much for that. And I hope our audience finds this helpful too. Got just a couple more questions for you. It's just been fantastic having all this info and this conversation with you. As someone who strongly relates to this topic, what are 2 things you want us to know about neurodivergence?
So I think the first thing is that it's okay. It's going to be okay, and it's okay. This is a personality trait. Doesn't matter what the cause was. This is, where you are or where your child is or where your coworker is at this point in time in their life. And then the second thing is just to keep an open mind, and be very kind and gentle with yourself and with them. Because especially if you're in a dynamic where it's really difficult, as you're working towards a kinder approach to the situation, there will be times where you're doing a great job and other times where it's like, you just, it, you backslide or you lose it. And if you are a person who's trying to work with yourself, there are times when, let's use cleaning, for instance, for me. Like, there'll be times when, I've had great weeks where everything is just organized and put away and it's just going good. And then like something will happen at work or my schedule will change. And then all of a sudden I turn around and I'm like, what happened to my house?
Yes.
What's going on? And that's okay, because stress is deregulating or dysregulating. And so if you're dysregulated, it's really hard to do anything in a way that would seem, I don't want to use that word, but it's really hard to get back on track to where you want to be. So just be kind and gentle with yourself and be kind and gentle with other people, and keep an open mind.
Great reminders. I put those in there so people be able to see that. I appreciate it. And I believe this is what we've already said. So what words of support do you want to share?
That just yeah. So just be kind and gentle with yourself, and it's not try not to think of it as a good thing or a bad thing. It's just a thing.
I'm muting myself because I was told my keyboard is loud, and it's true. I have a mechanical keyboard now.
Oh, cool. I wanted to get one of those typewriter keyboards, but I haven't done it yet. And I'll be taking notes in the meeting, and I'll have to mute myself too.
Yep, same here. But I hope you like it if you get the typewriter keyboard. All right. Well, we covered a lot of great things, and I really appreciate what you brought here. One thing that I wanted to ask as well that I didn't think of ahead of time, just because, again, I don't know a whole lot about this, is autism considered neurodivergence?
Yes. So from what I remember learning about autism is that even ADHD is on the spectrum of autism. So and autism is a spectrum. So there's high functioning, and there are some where it's really extreme. And then a lot of times neurodivergent comes with comorbidities. So there will be other things that a person is dealing with as well. So that can exacerbate the symptoms. And, autism is very much like ADHD, but more.
Yeah.
So it can have, so even like ODD is on the spectrum. So is OCD, all of that, under that spectrum. And I guess in order for them to diagnose you with autism, I think you have to have many of those symptoms happening all, consistently. So even I have as a teacher, I've had students with autism. I've had friends with children who are autistic. I've had friends who are autistic. So there are a lot of ways that they learn to cope and to deal, and it helps them when other people are understanding of what they need. And then I found the most successful ones are the ones who are able to instill that idea of communicating with people. I need a break.
Yeah.
I just need to go in my room for a little bit, or I'm going to walk away right now. Even a simple little thing, saying something so that people don't think that you're just dismissing them, because that's part of growing. Even it doesn't matter what your situation is. It's always very important to learn how to communicate with other people, so in a kind way. So the same way we want people to accept us for our diversity and differences, we want to be able to show that same compassion to other people. And that's just part of the growth and learning, even for someone who is highly autistic.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So we've covered that this can, you know, are dealing with as children and adults, wide spectrum, and the way that it can be affected. It's not a bad thing. It's not a good thing. It's just a thing. Showing compassion, just knowing how to communicate, even just subtly, to be understood and to not be seen as like rude or dismissive. And we've got great recommendations on where people can learn more, whether they want to learn more for themselves or for someone they love or care about. And thanks so much for bringing all of this knowledge and enlightenment to us, Janae. Um, is there anything else you wanted to leave anyone with?
Just always do lots of your own research. Talk to professionals if you can, counselors, find reputable books out there. And not every source is going to give you what you need for your particular situation. So just keep reading, find different things, and then find what works for you. And that will be the best way to move forward.
That makes perfect sense. Personalized approach.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thanks so much, and thank you for watching, and whether you're watching live or on replay, and I hope you have a fantastic day and stay inspired.
Do something that makes you stronger every day.
Take care. Thanks.